the main focus was on women, poor, farmers, as well as on the youth. These topics are considered as the key roles in Viksit Bharat.
Our Honorable Prime Minister's vision, he wants to kind of double the income of people under the poverty line. For that, you need to create new opportunities.
How technology is playing a crucial role and as an enabler in the contribution or achieving this goal of Viksit Bharat.
Technology is not only playing a role of an enabler, it's actually playing a role of a disruptor.
AI, resilience, as well as semiconductors are considered as a trinity towards the digital growth. So, how do you see that they are, shaping the future of enterprises?
The disruption could be because of a downtime, it could be an outage, or it could be a cyber attack. Important for us to have that resilience.
What trends are you observing in cyber attacks?
Important to have citizen awareness, important to have employee awareness at all times.
From the business perspective, how technology, including like AI, blockchain, or is helping in supporting the business and improving the efficiency, customer experience.
Company which you can buy insurance from a single portal, and across those portals you can actually have options which are available to the subscribers.
Hi everyone, myself Mohinee Singh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CXO Junction, a leading tech media house. Being in this industry since years now, still what I feel is that there is so much to learn about IT and cybersecurity. And to deep dive into one aspect of this today, I have a special guest with whom I will be talking about Beyond Business, which is India's tech and cyber odyssey. Cyber frauds in India are rapidly, increasing and has increased in just one last year. AI-driven impersonation and deepfakes are now on the rise, and new regulations like DPDP Act and mandatory audits for crypto exchanges are reshaping the landscape. Meanwhile, BFSI and government sectors remains the prime targets. Citizens are falling prey to increasingly scams. And national security conversation has now got into the AI and cyber as a key domain of warfare. So let's deep dive into this conversation with my guest, Mr. Akshay Garkel, a seasoned professional in digital AI technology and cyber. Welcome, Mr. Akshay. How are you doing?
Very well, and thank you, Mohinee, for having me over. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited by CXO Junction.
It's my pleasure as well. So today we are going to talk about the concept of Viksit Bharat 2047. And to begin this conversation, my first question will be the same. If you would like to brief about what is this exact concept and the vision of Viksit Bharat.
Yeah. See, Viksit Bharat has essentially been the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister. That how do we make our country self-sustainable? How do we uplift our country to be fully developed? And at the same time, how do we kind of make sure that all the objectives, whether it is sustainability, whether it is growth, being ready for future technologies, we have a digital public infrastructure. So how do we kind of use digital governance to service the citizens of the country. For example, smart cities is one example. And as we go along, how do we be responsible from a net zero perspective? So how do we achieve sustainable growth? But at the same time, through the sustainable growth, how do we kind of make sure that, from an economic perspective, we are out there. And not only that, but we've all heard of this term called as Atmanirbhar Bharat. So,
Yeah.
All the white spaces in terms of manufacturing, in terms of sustainability, in terms of technology, how do we address those and how do we get developed in those areas? And last but not the least, how do we kind of create, opportunities for all? And there are new skills. How do we get ready for those new skills? For example, AI, robotic, automation, and things like that.
Fair enough. So, when I was actually reading about this topic and then doing my own research, the main key goals which I got to, read was the four key goals where, or the main focus was on women, poor, farmers, as well as on the youth. So, what is that, why they are, or these topics are considered as the key roles in Viksit Bharat?
Yeah. So I think you actually hit the nail on the head, because these are very imperative topics. Though I'm not a champion in these areas, but I can share my perspective. And if you look at our honorable Prime Minister's vision, he wants to kind of double the income of people under the poverty line. For that, you need to create new opportunities. For example, creating new cities, right? For example, Tolera in Gujarat is a classic example there, right?
Right.
Where new opportunities are coming up. You see creating new solutions or creating new initiatives. For example, the Atal Tinkering Labs or the Semiconductor Mission of India, right? There too again new opportunities come up. Infrastructure development is another area. So we've seen so much of road connectivity which is coming up, infrastructure coming up. But obviously with the infrastructure and cities getting closer to each other, bullet trains initiative and so on and so forth, you will see newer cities spring up, you will see new opportunities come up, right? So that is one, of course. From an agriculture standpoint, I think how do you use technology, right, to kind of foster the farmers' productivity, efficiency, and kind of help them to grow better, right? For example, use of drones to kind of go and start, you throwing the seeds, for example, in the fields, or basically use AI to kind of measure the soil in terms of how much water is required by the soil and when. Or you look at robotics to kind of go and see at the time of harvest, can you actually pluck out whatever has been grown, whether those are plants, whether those are vegetables, fruits, or any of the or grains and so on and so forth, right? So in the entire process of farming, where can technology really play an important role to kind of make the farmer's life easy and help them? There's another area on supply chain, right? We've also seen that the mid agents have been removed, and today farmers can actually go and sell directly to the market, right? So that also eases out, and using technology to kind of create aggregator platforms, right? To kind of go out there and sell your product. I think those are the things which entail a part of Viksit Bharat. And then you also spoke about women empowerment. So
Yes.
how do you kind of look at the women empowerment by basically helping the ladies who essentially working from home or are housewives? Can you give them an income? Can you give them some livelihood to look forward to? And especially in the rural areas is what the Prime Minister's mission. And so again, that's another part of and youth, of course, as I already
Interesting.
mentioned. How do you create more opportunities for the youth? How do you reskill them, right? Today, no offense, but a driver's son or a daughter is actually getting into engineering and doing medical, right? That's how you basically change. But even if I have to continue doing a blue collar job, how do I kind of educate myself? How do I learn the art of technology? How do I learn the art of understanding the business, and then contribute in my way, which will help in my personal growth as well? So these are some of the points that I can share with you.
So I think that's really set to the right strong foundation towards the progress of the country, and looking forward to be part of this wonderful initiative. So coming to my next question, Akshay, how technology is playing a crucial role and as an enabler to in the contribution or achieving this goal of Viksit Bharat.
Absolutely, and I can tell you, technology is not only playing a role of an enabler; it's actually playing a role of a disruptor, bringing
Okay.
in chaos
Okay.
and for the larger good. And the way the adoption essentially has happened is immense, right? For example, if you look at the adoption of AI in healthcare, manufacturing, adoption of and of course the AI mission of India essentially has already laid down certain guidelines, but of course we are looking forward to the formal guidelines coming in play, and the rules coming in play on the pretext of legality, ethics, and technology. Then you've got the cyber elements. So we have a digital public infrastructure. So how does the cyber essentially play an important role in terms of looking at monitoring this infrastructure and making sure that we are one step ahead of the attackers and the hackers who basically compromise the digital ecosystem within the country. Then of course we've got blockchain, to kind of look at various aspects. Then you have the smart city, which is a very heavy tech for various citizen services that the government provides today. Apart from that, of course, there is a fair amount of automation, analytics. If you look at the analytics as well, Mohinee, we've seen dashboards for various chief ministers across the state, right, who use a high degree of analytics to basically look at the crime rate, monitor what's happening, at various departments, whether it is commerce or whether it is looking at perspectives around, welfare, looking at, the natural calamities, that sort of data, also looking at, economic welfare, then all the projects that the state essentially has invested in, what's the progress happening there, and then kind of correlating all that information and running analytics to see what's the progress the state has made, right? So that's another high tech adoption that today we've been seeing.
Okay.
Apart from that, there are so many other use cases, right? Small scale industry, MSMEs, government. If you've seen the startup ecosystem, government has started Invest India, right? Startup India. There also a high degree of automation is being used for various purposes. And the entire taxation, structure of our country, right, is again on high degree of automation. Needless to say, if you look at the GST and the other taxation, direct taxes, indirect taxes, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
From the business perspective, how technology, including like AI, blockchain, or whether it is digital transformation, is helping in supporting the business and improving the efficiency, customer experience, and 360-degree aspect of any business.
Yeah, I mean, see, there are so many business processes that today are adopting high degree of AI and digital and technology, right? So, for example, let's take an example of an insurance company. A lot of insurance companies are getting lightweight using digital shelving. What that means is that can I actually you've got a company which you can buy insurance from a single portal, and across those portals you can actually have so many options which are available to the subscribers. Second is you look at perspectives of underwriting. Right now there is a risk-based underwriting which essentially happens. Under a certain value, underwriters may not request for a medical policy or a medical test to be done, but above certain value you mandatory have to go through a medical test or age and things related to that. The system will actually do the correlation and tell you. Integration with open APIs through various platforms such as Sybil, buying patterns, social media usage and things like that will also actually define your risk profile, right? Apart from that, let's take an example of automobile, right? You got an upstream and a downstream. Your downstream is purely inventory management, and your upstream may be your distributor management or a customer relationship management. So how do I kind of predict what is going to be my production, or what needs to be my production versus depending on the demand and the supply, right? Also certain policies which may be coming in at the country level or at the global level will also drive the demand, and hence the demand to kind of increase my production or reduce my production or keep it constant, right? Again, heavy reliance on analytics, heavy reliance on forecasting, heavy reliance on AI will do the trick. Of course there are CRM systems now, but you have a lot of cognitive which is being built, and now of course with agentic AI and LLMs coming in play, that's another altogether a new world, right? So that's just to give you a few examples from a business standpoint.
Right. So what I see that businesses are under pressure of increasing their efficiency, but at the same time keeping their organization very secure.
Yeah.
So how in business should be operationally put their efforts in the efficiency, but with along with cyber resilience?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, and we as cyber professionals have been facing this question for a long time. And when we initially started, our organization started adopting the tenets of information security, it used to be the cyber or the information security team's problem alone. It was never an organization-wide problem. Now, of course, by looking at the impact that poor cyber control can actually create, such as we like data breach or brand reputation loss or a financial loss, right? It has started impacting everyone, and everybody really understands the need for having a very strong cyber control. But at the same time, how do you actually balance between the right tenets of business, ease of doing business, at the same time making sure that the minimum security baseline is adopted? If you look at Mohinee, the regulated entities, especially organization which may be regulate under a regulatory obligation, will essentially have to follow a mandatory guideline issued by the regulator.
Okay.
And today, if you look at the regulation of our country, whether it is whether I am a market participant or an infrastructure institution, non-banking financial sector, or a bank, or a telecom player regulated under the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, and so on and so forth. I can tell you that our regulation infrastructure is one of the top of the line across the globe. If I benchmark how India has essentially looked at it, yes,
Okay.
they are they are sensitive to the fact that ease of doing business is also important, but at the same time, we are working in a very collaborative ecosystem, and from that standpoint, we don't want that any compromise should happen, especially if I'm a business which comes under a national critical infrastructure importance purview, right? Then it impacts the economy at large, and hence making sure that relevant cyber controls are adopted, and the adoption is not only one time or a point in time, but it is a continuous monitoring of continuous adoption of those cyber controls. For example, organizations have their own security operations center. They monitor their assets and business 24/7. They do a lot of threat intelligence activity. They actually would also like to understand where do we stand against our adversaries, and then which are the cyber issues at large, and how do I kind of build that intelligence in my system and build a proper correlation normalization model with obviously cognitive intelligence built on top, so that I can predict that I may be getting attacked in no time, or are there any adversaries sitting out there which can lead to a larger kill chain, right? So those are the aspects that one needs to consider, and of course I agree that balance is important, but we always say cyber is not it's not a brake to your business, it's actually an accelerator to your business, right?
Okay. Can you share some examples of how different sectors are embedding cybersecurity in their daily business operations?
Absolutely. I mean, cyber, as I said, right? Please treat it as a part of your business enabler and not a break to the business. And hence, a lot of sectors are using cybersecurity from an enablement perspective. For example, if you look at the financial services, right? Of course, continuous monitoring, vulnerability assessment, pen test, third-party risk, strategy governance, all of those adoptions are there. But if you look at, say, for example, a transaction monitoring from a fraud and risk standpoint, right? Cybersecurity is being utilized in a large way there. Then essentially you look at manufacturing. Integration of operational technology and information technology again is being used in a large way. If you look at healthcare, within healthcare as well, privacy of data records and patient information, right? That's very critical. So there are security monitoring plus security controls which are being utilized there, right? And so on and so forth. As I've already given you, data about if you look at a quick commerce company, right? So looking at how do you have the customer information, how do you secure the customer information, right? So looking at API security and looking at security from various other perspectives is something that one really needs to take into consideration. So various tenets of security being adopted by various sectors as such, and obviously the list is endless. Whether you go into defense sector, whether you go into FS, you go into digital natives, you go into fintechs, simple corporate companies, maybe a law firm or a promoter driven firm or a mid-market company, all will have different tenets of security, but at the end of the day there is a common denominator that security is not only one time, it's a continuous process.
Fair enough. So since AI, resilience as well as semiconductors are considered as a trinity towards the digital growth, so how do you see that they are shaping the future of enterprises?
So Mohinee, I think a great question. Let's talk about the operational resilience and the cyber piece.
Okay.
Of course, as I said, that important for the organizations to have a well defined resiliency plan, whether the disruption could be because of a downtime, it could be an outage, or it could be a cyber attack. Important for us to have that resilience. And if you take it in the context of the country, how does the digital public infrastructure keep running is very important, and hence building those contingencies at various critical points is important. Now, of course, with AI coming in, a lot of cognitive coming in, we are also looking at disruptions because of compute, right? And disruption in compute. So how does one actually factor that perspective as well? Extremely important, and hence quantum and other areas are coming in the play. In addition to that, when you look at the semiconductor, right? Now semiconductor mission within the country, right? Semiconductor actually resolves and brings in the sovereignty over any technology or a compute, right? And that's the whole objective of semiconductors. India, of course, and we'll talk more about it, but India, of course, has started the adoption brought in through the Semiconductor Mission of India, and that's going to be a huge disruptor and an enabler for various businesses. And of course, as we spoke about Viksit Bharat from an Atmanirbhar standpoint.
Okay, I think that's a really interesting answer, Akshay, and you have clearly connected the dots how these three elements actually plays a crucial role together. So my question to you is, with the rise in ransomware and phishing incidents, what trends are you observing in cyber attacks, and what do you see is the right balance between stronger regulation, stricter enforcement, and widespread public education?
Sure. Now, so if you look at ransomware as service is actually growing, because see, ransomware issues are only going to grow, right? Important to have citizen awareness, important to have employee awareness at all times. We've also seen that the entire supply chain disruption, attack on infrastructure, attack on the entire ecosystem is again on the rise, and lot of reported attacks. So many attacks which are not even reported are also creating a huge disruption, right? In addition to that, we've also seen overall, if you look at the regulatory landscape, the enforcement aspect is something that has really helped improve or put a curb, right? But this has to be done at all times, Mohinee, because today if you just look at enforcing it once is not helpful, and hence there's also a fear of God in the form of fines and penalties which have been instilled, right? Which I believe is a negative motivation, but at the same time important, because organizations definitely need to pay heed to what essentially they've been doing from a standpoint. Because today if there is a breach, for example, the breach essentially and if there are penalties and fines which are applicable because of the breach, regulators are not going to look at the breach happened and hence the penalty is applied. It's more about what are the security controls that were adopted, what were the practices in place, whether the SOPs and policies were very well clearly defined and communicated, was there enough level of awareness in the organization. In spite of all of that, the breach happened, it happened. No organization is hack proof today, right?
Right.
So that is where it is.
Sure. So, coming to my next question, which is if you had to give one piece of advice to business leaders and citizens for staying cyber resilient in 2026, then what it would be? And not only from the technology perspective, but from the growth and livelihood perspective.
So one is, of course, cyber awareness is a continuous process. So whether you do it through a spear phishing exercise, or you do it through classroom trainings, or you do it through simulations, even today the boards of organizations are mandated to go through such
Right.
trainings, right? Second is, of course, as I've already mentioned, right, a continuous monitoring is the need of the hour. Today organizations say that we are a small agile organization, we are a startup, do we really need this? Answer is yes, because today you have a lot of investor money which has been invested. You have your own, in case if you're a bootstrap or a seed capital promoter, then too, you essentially don't want any disruptions because of cyber, right? And that also kind of shakes up the investor confidence, right? Third is, also to look at from a citizen standpoint and digital public infrastructure perspective, or a country's perspective. Very important aspect, Mohinee, that we should also consider is the cross-border attacks, right? Today we've seen that there are so many cross-border attacks, and India is one of the targets, especially after we writing ourselves so well on the global map. Whether it is trade, whether it is cooperation, whether it is economy, or social inclusion, I think we are all there, right? India has actually written ourselves very well on the map. So because of which we are essentially a prey of cyber attacks as well. That is one reason, right? So my suggestion here would be to kind of also look at how do we treat those cross-border attacks, how do we build the intelligence, and how do we share that intelligence across the board, right? That would be another advice that one can. And last but not the least, if you look at cyber, it's not a CISO problem, it's not only a department problem. While of course at the country level we have a lot of cyber cells which have come up now at various police stations and law enforcement agencies.
Yeah.
But each citizen has to be aware.
Right.
Each citizen has to take their own cognizance.
Yeah.
Each employee should think twice before clicking on any link, right? Especially when it is a transfer. And then you need to run a zero trust, security by design, privacy by design as a model to kind of build those efficiencies. And they always say, Mohinee, that the cost to security is much lesser when you kind of do by design as compared to when you treat it as a post facto.
That's interesting. Okay, so that is something everyone is listening can implement. So how is the DPDP 2023 expected to transform the way organizations in India manage to secure personal data? And what strategic approaches should businesses adopt to ensure compliance? And what would it be the effective roadmap for implementation?
So Mohinee, I think we have come a long way. We literally saw the Sri Krishna report to actually having the rules also finalized now, right? And the Digital Personal Data Protection Act essentially is to basically protect the identity of individuals, right? And of course, we know that organizations today would be either a data fiduciary or a significant data fiduciary. But what is really important is to see, how do you kind of adopt the journey? Many organizations may visualize a DPDPA as a privacy issue, and then say that, okay, this is a compliance activity and I have a cost to compliance. My request would be to kind of look at it differently. To say that data privacy is actually a business enabler. And the reason we say that is, just imagine you as an organization, whether you're a fintech or you're a quick commerce company or you're a bank or you're a manufacturing company, go out there to your clients and say that I am DPDPA compliant, or I have all the privacy controls deployed, implemented now. Imagine the level of trust that's going to increase with your customer base,
Right.
right? And I think that is something that one needs to see, which is actually the that's the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed, right? So my request would be to look at this act as a welcome change in the country, and it's the power in the hands of every individual. Yes, there will be nuances, so organizations really need to look at their business process. They need to understand where the data is, where is the personal identifiable information sitting, in what format, right? Is it structured, is it unstructured? Then there is a data life cycle, right from creation of data to usage, storage, access, then archival, destruction, and so on and so forth. So what stage of that particular life cycle is my data in, right? And am I doing do I have the right checks and balances to kind of activate or have a proper control across every guideline or clause in the act, which basically says, for example, right to forget, right? If I have somebody who comes to me and says, I would like you to forget my data for whatever reasons given under the purview of the act, do I have the relevant technical controls to do a deletion to the last mile, while of course keeping whatever is required for the law enforcement agencies, right? Look at consent management. Consent management is another area which is basically being used, and organizations are critically looking at that aspect. So actually looking at how am I going to, and if I'm a significant data fiduciary, then I need to have a consent manager, I have to have a consent auditor, and how does really that entire mechanism, and it's a program, right? It's just not a tech platform that you're actually adopting. So how do you kind of put all the pieces together and join the dots there? Of course, you look at your agreements, right? If you look at any breach notification that you need to plan for, it could be that it's your third party where the breach may happen, and assuming if it happens from the third party, then is your back-to-back agreement with the third party in place or not, right? Do you have the right SLAs or not? If your reporting is in whatever X hours, is the reporting from the third party to you in X minus Y hours, right? I think those are the things that organizations need to pay, and this is a complete journey, and it's an adoption rather than a one-time activity. Organizations have been given 18 months to kind of comply. So important to get started if they haven't got started yet.
So do you think that India's semiconductor push can reduce the dependence on foreign supply chains and strengthen the digital control, especially in critical industries?
So Mohinee, I think it's a great question and very timely, because as we know, India just started the semiconductor mission, and one of the idea was to be Atmanirbhar, and again various perspectives. One is, how do we kind of first fuel our internal consumption for various purposes? One is to be independent, self-reliant. Second is, how do we build more trust into the systems? And third, essentially, is the cyber angle, right? So how do we make sure that there is security by design, right, at the chip level, right? At this point in time, we see India is going to manufacture, as per the data, about 50,000 wafers, right, per month on monthly basis. We've got tie-ups with companies like TSMC, Intel, and various other organizations, and Dolera, Noida, Tamil Nadu. These are some of the locations where factories are being set up. But of course, this is just the beginning, I can tell you. The overall focus essentially is to see how do we kind of become the fourth largest manufacturing nation by 2030.
Okay.
And we are looking at close to about $100 to $110 billion industry, right? That's the overall chip manufacturing. Today, if you look at kind of chips, you look at microprocessors, RF, and so on and so forth. Essentially, these are the type of wafers essentially which are going to be manufactured. And we've also seen sectors which will benefit, right? So you'll have the EV sector, electronics and consumable sector. You will also have defense as a sector, right? These are some of the sectors which are going to be immensely benefited out of the solar sector, and of course the EV sector, sorry, the green energy sector, and so on and so forth. These are some of the sectors which are going to be immensely benefited. And then of course once India starts using all Indian based chips, with obviously the help of the companies like I mentioned, TSMC, Intel, and of course Samsung, we are going to also start the import, right? Sorry, export. So once we start the export, that is also going to be slated. And as I mentioned, right, we want to be the fourth largest manufacturer in the world by 2030, and I don't see that to be an impossible task.
Okay, so I think that's an important angle. Semiconductor independence will define the economic and cyber strength for decades. Interesting. So I think we have covered, a lot of aspects today, whether it is Viksit Bharat or it is, cyber resilience, and how security awareness plays a crucial role as an individual, not only as at a CISO level and others. So thank you so much, Akshay, for joining this conversation. It was really amazing, and I think the audience has learned a lot today. So to end this conversation, maybe one last key takeaway you would like to give to your audience. So I'll just over it to you.
So Mohinee, my key message is that India's journey has towards Viksit Bharat will be really shaped by its ability to scale technology in a responsible way, where of course digital infrastructure, AI, technology actually drive the inclusion and the growth, while cybersecurity builds trust and resilience to kind of foster the economic progress of the country. Sustainable development will of course come not only from technology alone, but from actually embedding trust, security, and accountability into the fabric of governance, business, into our daily lives. Thank you.